Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Muslim CEO podcast. I'm your host, Omar Rashid, and we have Abdul Haseeb Basit and Omar Khaliel, co-founders of the Muslim CEO Collective. In this episode, we will be exploring the why, the how, the vision, and the objectives of the Muslim CEO Collective and its future plans. Okay, so I'm going to introduce first Abdul Haseeb Basit. So Abdul Haseeb is a digital finance specialist and has over 25 years experience working at the intersection of finance, technology and strategy. He's the co-founder and principal of Ellipses, which incubates both for-profit and non-profit businesses in the ethical finance sector. And as part of his portfolio, Abdul Haseeb holds several positions such as co-founder and chair of the Muslim CEO Collective, co-founder of Medina Angels. He's the CEO of Alphalytics. He's the CFO of Global Digital Finance, and he's the co-founder and CFO of Aviro. He was also previously the CFO of Innovate Finance. He's also a qualified management accountant and has an MBA with distinction from Imperial College Business School. Abdul Haseeb is an Islamic and ethical finance advocate and promotes the transformational impact of technology on the industry, and he was selected as one of the top 100 Bain tech leaders in the UK in 2018. Abdul Haseeb, Assalamu alaikum, brother, how are you?
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me, Umar.
MashaAllah, I have to say, that's a lot of co-founder and a kind of a lot of founder sort of thing. I mean, how do you keep yourself, how do you manage to keep yourself free and busy?
I'm going to leave now, by the way. I don't think you need me after that introduction.
Don't worry, we'll introduce you as well with a good intro as well.
That introduction, that's my hope.
I think the easiest way to summarize that is I'm known for a lot of the community work that builds a public profile. And in the background, I'm involved in a number of businesses with some very smart people where I get to spend some of my time across a range of things, always learning, always evolving with what's happening in the fintech space and with emerging technologies. And so, alhamdulillah, I get to do some very interesting things with some very smart, interesting people.
Yeah, no, mashallah, mashallah. Now, we will come on to Omar Khaliel. Brother Dori, your bio, you've got a background is in commercial finance where you have spent over 15 years, notably in a variety of FTSE 100, FTSE 5 and multinational blue chip companies across UK, UAE, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Hong Kong and China. Omar is also the founder and the CEO of Riba Free Foundation, where he plans to use his experience and knowledge to help the masses become financially literate. The foundation is a thought leader which advocates for people to lead a riba-free lifestyle, and one of the organization's primary aims is to help systematically eradicate riba from society. Umar is a leadership development coach and is enthusiastic about developing the next generation of well-rounded, financially literate, ethical and responsible future leaders. He is also CEO of Digital Easily, an impact-led and ethical conscious digital marketing agency. And the most important thing is Umar has also spelled his name correctly, which is O-M-A-R. Umar, assalamu alaikum, brother.
I mean, brother, I like that. I definitely like that. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi sahbihi ajma'in. Pleasure to be on, Umar.
No, the pleasure honestly is mine. So, Umar, I mean, look, FTSE 5 multicultural chip companies, UK, UAE, Saudi, South Africa, Hong Kong, China. Do I assume that you've also been to those countries as well?
Yes, yeah, I've worked in those countries, and just those jurisdictions. It's a good question, actually, because there's many other countries that I used to cover that are not on there, but I put countries that I've actually physically been in and worked in. Which one was your favourite, or which one did you find, something out of the normal, not what you quite expected? I like them all for different reasons, but if I had to pick one, I have to say UAE, because that's where I started to. This is where the thought process of, for me, Islamic finance, riba-free, and how I would later cross paths with Abdul Haseeb was incubated, and also where I studied as well. So for me, that would be the most important one, the pivotal one. Okay, mashallah, mashallah. So Abdul Haseeb, just quickly, a bit about yourself. Are you from London, in and out, born in London, but raised in London?
So I was born in the UK on the south coast, and very early on, my folks moved to Saudi Arabia. So I grew up for the first 10 years of my life between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, where we're originally from. Came back to the UK when I was 10 years old, lived in different parts of the UK. But largely for the majority of my life now, I've been in London since uni, and in my professional career, always worked from London, but globally I had the chance to work in many different countries like Omar Khaliel, but always based out of London. So London is very much home.
Which part of London is home for you now?
Southeast near Canada Water, so a nice fledgling Muslim community here in Rotherhithe, where I live, and it's a pleasure to be part of it.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. And Umar, yourself?
I would usually say London because I'm so used to speaking to people internationally. Because when I say my home, I'm literally 30 miles outside of London, but practically in London because my day job is in London and home is High Wycombe. So 30 miles from London, but work I'm in and around Liverpool Street, Great Portland Street, the city. So I'm pretty much all over London for work. But yeah, home is High Wycombe.
Okay, okay. And Umar, look, how did you kind of get into commercial finance? Was it something from a finance that's an industry that you wanted to get into, or did you kind of fall into it?
Myself.
Yeah.
So I actually, when I was studying my A-levels at college, I was a bit of a rebel. My parents really wanted me to go to grammar school, and when I went to interview for the grammar schools, I like so all these kind of like people dressed in suits and ties, very uniform, and after finishing kind of GCSEs, I was like a bird that needed to just fly. And I was very much unorthodox. So, and I'd like to think most Umars are. I think that the name has a big effect on people. I'm a firm believer of that.
100%.
So I basically upset my parents by saying, look, I don't want to go to grammar school, and I decided to go to a college called Henley College, which they treated you more like adults. And there I started studying law, business, and economics. And I was actually going to study a law degree, believe it or not. I had a law lecturer. She was like maybe 90 plus, but she was a phenomenal lecturer. I'd never forget her. For somebody that age, she was so prim, proper, but she had a fantastic way of teaching. And the only reason why I considered going into law was because of the way she taught. And I realized when I went to university, you know, within the first week, I changed my degree subject matter to finance. But the thing was, when I got to university, I then realized that actually I don't need to be at university to become an accountant. And then, so again, being a rebel, my third year placement, I never went back. And because I would always hear that, oh, if you're not going to get anywhere in life if you don't have a university degree. And I thought, oh, hold on a minute, that's not necessarily true. If you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, yeah, I get that. But for finance, you certainly don't. And then, so I realized finance was probably the most critical subject matter in the world. And I just, started working for a number of companies. We used to temp back then. I don't know, this generation probably temping is not so common, but I used to take a lot of financial roles and then build my experience. And through that, and I actually ended up doing my PER experience for the ACCA before I completed exams. So it was good.
Okay, mashallah. I mean, I'm not going to say you currently got a face that looks like a rebel now. I would like to say that you've probably matured, mashallah. But we'll leave that there. Abdul Haseeb, in your bio, in your intro, you're also a qualified accountant. Am I right in assuming that you didn't then kind of pursue what would be classed as a normal accountancy sort of profession, and you've gone into a specialist finance role? How did that occur?
Yeah, so much like Omar, when I studied business at university, I was always quite good at maths, so that was the direction I took. There was heavy accounting focus at university, and when I graduated, I found that starting out with a professional accounting qualification, I already had a head start of a year on most students. So it made sense to do an accounting qualification. I actually worked as an accountant for 5 years while I qualified. Post qualification, I started to get into more sort of strategic finance roles, moved into financial services, and from there, really, the role evolved from what would be classed as a pure accounting role to more strategy and finance and product type roles. And that's really where I got my grounding in conventional banks around financial services, and then latterly moved into the fintech space.
Okay, mashallah. Mashallah. So who wants to kind of share the story of how then you two met?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share the story of how I thought we met, and I think Omar will add to that. So we were introduced by a mutual friend in the Islamic finance space when Omar was starting the Riba Free Foundation, and we got to know each other. I liked the concept of what Omar was doing, and from there, I had the great privilege of being involved in some of the work that Riba Free were doing in the early days, and Omar was always using me as a sounding board for anything kind of Islamic finance related, given my background. And then he reminded me that that wasn't actually the way we met. So maybe he can add on from there.
So I'll quickly just share a couple of stories. Where where I actually saw Abdul Haseeb first was digitally. So prior to launching RFF, a lot of people don't know this, but I was already planning and plotting to see who the real I would like to say the real trailblazers and the thought leaders were in this space. And I had a number of people on a list of paper, and he didn't know this at the time, but his name was on that list alongside people like Haris and others like who he said it was a kind of mutual connector in this regard. But when and Omar, you know this, so everybody within RFF has studied the fiqh of Islamic finance under Mufti Faraz Adam, and Abdul Haseeb was actually contributing to that Majalla course where we were learning Islamic finance. So Mufti Faraz would bring in loads of people from the Islamic finance history from a practitioner perspective, and so he was actually a practitioner at the time. And we also had a mutual common connection with somebody called Tariq Al Diwani, who Abdul Haseeb will come on to explain because he wrote the famous book The Problem with Interest, right? And he referenced that quite a bit. So I'd already had his name on a piece of paper to basically headhunt at some point. Then he came on to teach us a session on the Majalla. And then the last piece of story I'll finish with is me and Abdul Haseeb were actually part of a wider strategic hybrid group on halal Islamic finance and the halal economy, put together by somebody that we mutually know in the industry. And there was, various stakeholders from across the industry, maybe 20, 30 plus at one point in that first initial meeting. And obviously, anybody that knows me, that once they give me a mic or a moment to talk, it's pretty difficult for me to stop talking, right? As they say, once I pop I don't stop. And I remember he had to he was sat across the table from me, and he was sat next to Haris, who was our mutual connector, right? And Haris obviously I know from my days in the UAE. And so he had to leave early. So all he did is he walked round without saying anything. He just placed his card, his business card, in front of me and says, "We'll touch base, but I've got to leave." And it was good because he kind of read my mind, because I was going to go and speak to him anyway after the meeting anyway, because it was probably one of our first interactions physically. Although I knew a lot about him already. So yeah, that was my version of events.
So I
Okay.
didn't know that I was on a list until today. So that's news to me. But I did now recall the Majalla course, and Umar was one of many faces on a Zoom screen during COVID. At that point I wasn't formally introduced to everybody, as I spent most of the session talking about Islamic fintech. But it was nice to know that we'd had all these kind of points of connection, and then just through the Islamic finance scene in the UK, we had the chance to meet physically as well.
Did I pepper you with
Yeah.
questions that day by any chance?
Yeah, I remember the Q&A was pretty strong that day, which was very impressive.
Omar, I like how you said that you had Abdul Haseeb on a list and you headhunted him. I mean, I suppose headhunt is a better word than saying stalking him online,
Oh
I
no, no, no,
suppose.
bro! Look, I'm completely open and about this. I will stalk him, because anybody that is going to bring about khair for our ummah, I'm happy to stalk.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. So obviously we're talking today prominently about Muslim CEOs. So obviously, look, you guys have come from obviously, mashallah, a very successful background, a financial background. But how did then the concept of Muslim CEOs come about?
So maybe I can start with this. So after I left, conventional banking, I got into community building. One of the first things I did, which you mentioned, was became CFO of Innovate Finance, which is a industry body for fintech, and that really sort of started my journey in community building, and have done quite a bit since in the last 10 years. And I think it was really when I connected with Omar, a lot of the discussions we were having around Islamic finance and halal economy generally, we felt that as a community, we were not very well connected, not very well networked, not very collaborative, and there was more that we could do. And I think this is, as founders and CEOs of the organizations that we're responsible for, we felt that this was lacking in our own experience, and we wanted to do something about it. And in a conversation, I casually mentioned to Umar that, one of the things that I really wanted to do when I retire is get a bunch of really interesting, Muslim CEOs together for dinner every now and then, just to stay connected with what's happening in the space. And I think as the more you get to know Omar Khaliel, the more you realize that he's, once he gets hold of a good idea, he doesn't let it go. And also he's very tenacious. So, he was really, held a mirror up and said, well, why aren't you doing this now?
Yeah.
If you say you're good at community building and this is something you want to do, you should be doing it right now because we both perceive the need for it. And that really got me thinking. Actually, yeah, well, there's actually um, no credible reason not to do it now. In fact, it's probably more urgent now than ever for us to do this. And so we came up with a concept. I had a first guest speaker in mind. So we have a very specific format of what we did when we launched the Muslim CEOs dinner series as the first fixture of what we do. And it always revolves around a guest speaker and getting 20 to 30 CEOs in a room. And the guest speaker I had in mind was Tariq Abdawani, which Umar mentioned, and it just so happened that I had run into Tariq on a few occasions at Juma and elsewhere, and uh, had a long-standing offer to sit down and have a coffee with him. We actually ended up going out to lunch, and my job that day was to convince him to be our first guest speaker. And I said the words to him, if you don't become the guest speaker, I'm not going to do this. So the pressure's all on you.
No,
And
I was gonna say no pressure.
yeah, he very kindly agreed, and he was our guest speaker for the first dinner that we did in May 2024 in London. We had 25 CEOs in the room. He was obviously well received because Islamic finance is an area that touches everyone in business. And he's one of the pioneers of Islamic finance. A lot of the folks in Islamic finance are in the industry because of him and the body of work that he did. And from there, really, Umar then really was the catalyst around taking us around the UK, connecting us to different Muslim CEO groups in different parts of the UK.
Can I just interject then, and maybe Umar, maybe something for you to answer. Why CEOs? Why just Muslim CEOs? Why not maybe looking at
Yeah.
the next couple of levels down? Why was the focus just CEOs?
So before I answer that question, I'm happy to take that question. I just want to add a further context onto what Abdul
Yeah.
Haseeb has mentioned. Um, I think when I was and he's very much correct. I'm pretty much once I put my mind and focus to something because I understand the benefit of it. Casting a wide net for society, right? Having that kind of khair and also impacting people's lives for the better. So I am very much like a dog with a bone. But the beautiful thing is, Abdul Haseeb is very, very good at initiating and starting things. And I know you read out his bio earlier, but you forgot one thing off there, which is chief dinner organizer. He's fantastic at organizing dinners, right? He's got this reputation. So if anybody comes internationally, right, the first thing they do, I need a dinner. They're called Abdul Haseeb. So the amount of dinner invites we used to get from this guy was ridiculous, right? And so we would go to various industry dinners, and we had. So what he described to you earlier was a methodology that he's probably used throughout his career for 10 plus years, right? And then it was nice because I had a similar methodology for a networking dinner, and it was kind of like a coming together, so like a convergence. But there's two things I really really want to talk about before I talk about why CEOs. Number one is the concept of there's a particular ayah from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Wa'tasimu bihablillahi jami'an wa la tafarraqu." Hold on firmly to the rope cable of Allah and do not become divided. Right. This was this was pretty much the thinking that I had around about the time because as a Muslim community in the UK, 3 generations in, 5 million Muslims in the UK, right, and we're growing. all the time. We have all the attributes, and one thing I used to get frustrated by is that we have wealth, we have money, we have influence, we have academia, we have young talent, we have resources, and we just couldn't seem to put it all together, right? And the key people behind that are CEOs, and I'll come on to that in a second. But so that Quranic ayah was pretty much the cornerstone behind my thinking at the time. And I shared this with Abdul Haseeb, and this is where the conversation was initiated regarding, well, I'm very good at building communities. And I said, yeah, I know you are, so what's stopping us doing it now? And at the time, the other thing was a lot of people were seeing a lot of disruption and unrest around the world, which was also influencing our decision, right? And we just thought, look, there's a lot of doom and gloom. Let's do something positive, right? And when people come together and they share experiences and they have a conversation, it's really, really important. And the other concept I wanted to just touch upon is if you remember that Dar al-Arqam. So Dar al-Arqam was the first place where knowledge was initiated after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was granted the message. And remember, they used to go into the house of Arqam, his name was Arqam, and they would meet secretly. And the early adopters of Islam would learn about the deen whilst revelation was being revealed to the Rasul. But it was a place of meeting, networking, and discussion of strategy. Do you see what I mean? And I like to think that Muslim CEOs is a form of Dar al-Arqam. Do you see what I mean? Now, why CEOs? Very, very simple. Okay, very, very simple. They're decision makers. They are decision makers. Okay, and what we wanted to do is, I go to many. We're both highly networked. I go to a lot of networking dinners and I go to a lot of networking events. And when we talk about strategic collaboration, we wanted to bring together a like-minded community of people that thought similarly, and I'm sure Abdul Haseeb will touch upon certain aspects of what a founder or CEO goes through shortly. But what we didn't want at the dinners was somebody attending there representing a company and not being able to have the ultimate authority in making decisions. Because remember, at dinners you'll find CEOs and founders that meet and say, well look, I'm lacking this thing and I know your company has it, why don't we work together? When two decision makers are having a conversation together, things are a lot more efficient and they get done quicker, rather than somebody coming who's a head of the department or somebody lower down the pecking order has to go back and explain that, oh well, I went to this Muslim CEO dinner and I met this interesting person. And then he feeds back that information, and then you have a chain of events where you're initiating and arranging meetings. So we wanted to speed up that process, and ultimately we want founders, CEOs, and decision makers to come together to have that collaborative mindset and share resources. And like I say, we have the ingredients for a very successful curry or a dish. We just can't find the right chef.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that to say, CEOs and founders, folks at the top of the organization as decision makers, as Omar describes them, that can be a lonely role. There's a level of trust placed on you. You're responsible for people's jobs and livelihoods and their families, as well as the business. If things aren't going well or you're facing some challenges, that's not always something you can discuss with your own team. But if you have a peer group of CEOs and founders that you can speak to who've maybe gone through those kind of challenges before, or can signpost the way you might want to think about it or who you need to speak to, that's hugely powerful. And that's something that I've observed in other areas where I've done community building, where peer networks really add value. And that's really the aspiration we had here, was to build that peer network across the UK and internationally of Muslim CEOs who think about business in a certain way with alignment to their faith, thinking about the principles of Islamic finance, for example, as a way of doing business, and really engender that connectivity and create a safe space for that to happen, where you're not being sold to, you're not there to flog what you do. It's just a very collaborative, open atmosphere. And I think Omar Rashid, you've experienced it, having been to one of our dinners. So I'm sure you can sort of talk about your experience as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to go on to when Omar Khaliel mentioned about you being, chief organizer, because you organized the Birmingham event fantastically. It was something that I really, really enjoyed. And I think, one thing that I really took away from your Birmingham session, and I think the positivity around having CEOs, was that we also inspired each other. I found a lot of inspiration, a lot of wisdom, and like you said, it was people that I could resonate with, some of the people that had the same challenges or struggles that I may have had or had as well. And I think the key thing from it all, and obviously it's written in the title, Muslim CEOs, a lot of people there weren't just Muslims just by name or appearance, but actually you could see from their heart and sort of the values that they presented. And I think in this country, sometimes we struggle, I find, as Muslims to kind of really show our identity. Sometimes we think that it's going to hold us back in some shape. And what I liked at your event was people who actually weren't shy away from actually saying, we are Muslim, this is what our deen teaches us, this is how we should, conduct ourselves with other people as well as business. And I think for me, it was really, really inspiring, really, really good. And obviously I'm glad that, you reached Birmingham, took your time to reach Birmingham, because, there is a world outside of London.
They say the best till last.
You definitely did. You definitely did, and I think the fact that there was like 4 or 5 ummahs in the room definitely showed that as well. But I think like I just touched on, you had about 5 events. I think you had 2 in London, you had Birmingham, you had was it Bradford and
we actually did 6. We did Bradford, Manchester, Birmingham, and London. 4 cities,
yeah.
6 events in the first year.
Yeah, so over 100, I'm sure over 100 people who would have attended. Just from each of you personally, you obviously come across a lot of CEOs. Was there anything that you saw as a common theme, whether it might be how they perceived business within the Muslim community, whether there was a certain challenge that they all faced? Was there something that you picked up on that you thought, okay, that's a bit of a common theme nationally?
Yeah, so across the 6 events, we actually had 152 different CEOs attend, some repeat attendees across different cities, which was nice to see. And I think we had fairly similar themes come out in each one, even though we had different guest speakers from different industries. And this is a cross-industry group, so we had people from all different sectors, and of course from different regions as well. What we really found was, the first thing that the majority of people in the room would say was nothing like this existed when I was starting out, and this would have been really useful to me to have this kind of peer group. But they also recognize that now that they're in the position where they are, the role models, perhaps as Muslim CEOs, they have a responsibility to give back to our community as well and to act as role models. Beyond that, I think a lot of folks were talking about how this kind of alignment with faith and business is something that they really struggled with early on in their careers, especially if they went into professional careers, not didn't start off with their own business. A lot of times the senior management didn't look like them. There were no Umars, right? There was nobody with Muslim names or Muslim appearance in those organizations, and they didn't really see themselves growing through the ranks in those organizations. So they didn't really have those kind of mentors and role models. And so a lot of them, did step out of that space and go and build their own businesses or go back into family businesses. But now things are different, and now those that are in larger organizations where they have both Muslim and non-Muslim staff, they are very acutely aware that they need to act as those role models. And I think the final thing that everyone touches on is really the legacy that they want to leave as Muslim CEOs and entrepreneurs. What is it that they want to be remembered for? How do they want to benefit the community? And I think those are really key threads that came out across all the dinners that we did.
Yeah, so for me, there's a couple of things I'll mention, and I'll go through some of the format as well, just for people that may be hearing about us for the first time. But me and Abdul Haseeb, we discussed this, quite deeply before we started the dinner, and we thought, okay, look, we need to have a strategic purpose, and he's absolutely spot on. There was nothing like this. So there was many a time where Muslims were now, after 3 generations, at the pinnacle of their industry, or they've reached the ceiling. And so we tended to have a seat at particular tables, but we didn't have our own tables. And having our own tables are really, really important, based on our faith and principles, right? So, because we've got to be very clear. Islam is a holistic way of life. We don't just pick and choose. And one thing that we both had we both understood the issue of riba, and because riba is tied to business, we thought let's create a theme around how we can make money. There's nothing wrong with making money, right? But make sure we do it in a halal way, right? And whilst we do that, we scale our businesses, and whilst scaling our businesses, we create greater employment, greater opportunities, right? And employ based on merit, not just because we've got to do an EDI tick box or some sort of CSR campaign. We don't operate like that, right? We have this holistic way of life. So that was really, really important, and that's why it comes back to CEOs. Bringing CEOs together was pivotal to that, and the key thing was it wasn't happening. It actually wasn't happening at a CEO level. So when we had our first few dinners and we had the feedback, it was really, really interesting to hear from people. But the networking element was really, really key. One thing I just wanted to just touch upon was that Abdul Haseeb mentioned about how many dinners we've done, what locations, and had over 150 CEOs attend our dinners. But the format was, when we discussed this, the formats, we have a specific format, right, which obviously you've experienced. We allow everybody to participate, right, and you don't see many dinners like that, and we know that works. So, and I was saying to Abdul Haseeb at the time, London was always a challenge, right, because one of the principles that we wanted to embed, London can be problematic. So number one, we wanted to have private dining. We wanted to make sure that it had a theme. We wanted to make sure that it was for Muslim CEOs, founders, or anybody who was a trailblazer in that space. Halal food and no alcohol. Okay. London was an issue because most restaurants sell alcohol, and if Abdul Haseeb will tell you, it's one of my pet peeves, right? Really, really winds me up. Just hate being around alcohol, and so obviously. And you want a central London location. You can't go kind of east-west because it makes it problematic in terms of a accessibility and logistic issue. So we have, after going and prowling all over London to see which restaurants don't serve alcohol, we've got a couple of locations now. But outside of London, that wasn't an issue. Do you see what I mean? So we had that specific criteria, and then the other key thing was once we had a few dinners done, we started to get inundated with requests from just general people. And Allah best Abdul Haseeb, because he's done a lot of the hard work here, right? I mean, I kind of like planted a seed in his head, right? And then I was on his case. We've got to do it now. But he's actually gone and done all the substance behind. I mean, we work very well together. We're a good combination. But he was the one that made this happen. He brought it to life. And so we've just kind of like supported it with each other's networks. And the other thing was really, really key, right, is to get a really, really good guest speaker that people can benefit from his experience, right? And if you look at our dinners, I think we've pretty much ticked the box on a decent guest speaker who's inspirational and has done something.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the Birmingham guest speaker, I'm not going to lie, that was a real attraction for me to attend, as well as obviously being a Muslim CEO as well. So that definitely ticks the box. Just before we move on and kind of look at the future plans, I'm just going to do a very quick fire, about 5 questions, just so that our audience and listeners just to get to know you a little bit more as well. So Omar Khaliel, I'm going to ask you first. What's your favourite dish? And it's got to be your favourite. I don't want you to say everything on the menu, just one thing.
Chicken, grilled chicken.
Okay. Abdul Haseeb?
It probably have to be something Japanese, like udon noodles.
Okay, did not expect that. Okay. Abdul Haseeb?
I didn't expect that.
We've yet to find a halal Japanese restaurant that we can hold one of our dinners at, but it would be great to do that.
Yeah, inshallah. Let's see. Abdul Haseeb, favourite football team?
Arsenal, unfortunately.
Okay.
Bro, please don't ask him questions like that because he doesn't know what he's talking about. I told him already. If you want to watch football, I know you're going to ask. If you're going to watch football, there's only one team that's halal to support.
Go on.
You never walk alone, bro. You know.
No. You know, I'm not going to categorise you in a way, but you do have that look of being a Liverpool fan. I'm not going to stereotype in any sort of way or whatever. All right, but you do have that vibe of yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan. But anyway, let's quickly move on because obviously we could talk about Liverpool all day. Omar Khaliel, best piece of advice that you've been given, or any advice that you've read or anything.
One of my teachers in Dubai gave me some profound advice. It was two, but I'll give you one of them. He said, Ahmad, whatever you do, give sadaqah every day, every single day.
Okay, mashallah. Okay, Abdul Haseeb, see if you can beat that.
Definitely can't beat that, but
Yeah.
I'll trust your gut, I think. If it doesn't feel right, and you can't put your finger on why it doesn't feel right, give it time to understand why it doesn't feel right. Don't make any rush decisions.
Okay. I mean, something on your bucket list that's yet to be achieved, Abdul Haseeb.
Uh, Build my own house. That's
Okay.
always been a dream.
These
Yeah.
answers, I'm not expecting these answers, mashallah. I was seeing a different side of Abdul Haseeb today.
This is the thing, isn't it? We get to kind of know, we get to know the,
I
a
like
bit
it.
more
I
about
like
the
it. Putting them
individual.
on the spot. I suppose
Well,
you want
Abdul
to ask
Haseeb,
me.
sorry,
What
Omar.
do you want to ask me? Tell me. What do you want to ask me?
So, go on. So, what's something on your bucket list that yet to be achieved, or you would like
Um,
to do?
Personal one, I haven't done Hajj yet, so that's one that is on the bucket list, and another one is just the elimination of riba.
Okay, okay,
See,
inshallah. Uh,
he's got much better answers than I do on this.
yeah, I mean, you probably kind of answered.
Other than the Liverpool one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the last question probably you probably answered that as well. I was going to say, look, if you could change something about your industry, what would it be? So I'm guessing for you, or probably for both of you, the eradication of riba.
No, I think we can give some more context to that.
I
That's
think, I think this is, what we're trying to do here, right? Which is make it more collaborative, right? So I think allow a mechanism where Muslims can work together with Muslims more effectively. Understand, that there are more of us out there that we can work with, and contribute to each other's, to each other's success. I think that would be a fantastic outcome.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say strategic collaboration as well, but I'm going to come from a different angle then. I think what we need to do as a community is we need to have the confidence to articulate our version of what business looks like, and we need to showcase it to the world. Because if you look at the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, remember
Uh-huh.
he was Al Amin, right? It was his business dealings that had a profound effect that led to a marriage proposal, to his his kind of like advancement of the the Beit al-Mal, which is the Muslim treasury, right? And we have a very distinct USP, methodology and structure when it comes to business and trade. And so I think I would love to see one thing I talk often about is wealth, and I think what we need to relearn wealth and what it means to the Muslim Ummah. I think that's one thing that I'd love to see from a first principles perspective.
Yeah, no, inshallah, I don't disagree. Don't disagree. Right, I've got last two questions. So I'm going to ask you one of you each. So Abdul Haseeb, I'll ask you first. So moving forward, what's the vision for Muslim CEOs? So that could be in the next, I don't know, 12 months, next, 48 months, 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Sort of thing. What would you, how far? I don't know how far you've planned out, but what do you see is the next vision?
So I think with community initiatives like this, you can't have too long-term a horizon. When we started, I said to Omar Khaliel that let's do this for a year and let's see how we do, whether we get any traction. And alhamdulillah, we did. We got loads of traction. But the 150 or so CEOs that attended our dinners, we actually surveyed them in February to ask them what they would like to see more of. And I'm pleased to say we got some really good concrete feedback. It really helped us shape how we want to move forward and what we want to do for the next 12 months. And we kind of look at our 12-month cycles, Ramadan to Ramadan, and how we would like to, effectively move forward. And so we will be, and we are in the process of re-establishing as the Muslim CEOs Collective. So it's broader than just the dinner series that we have. There are many aspects to that. So firstly, we would incorporate in the UK as a community interest group or a community interest company or a CIC. We will look to host more dinners across more cities over the next year, but make them more intimate and more frequent. With the feedback we also got is that a lot of CEOs want to be part of a community in between those dinners. So the dinners will always be an entry point into the community, but we'll be setting up mechanisms for CEOs to commingle and collaborate in between those dinners as well. And we'll also be, touching on those pillars that we talked about that have been defined through this, so that, the connectivity, the collaboration, and the legacy piece. And a lot of that is about getting the message of Muslim CEOs out there. So, building up more of a communications arm, of which this is the first, this podcast is the first part of that. And we're really glad to have your leadership on this, Brother Rashid. And yeah, our view is we'll do this for the next 12 months. We'll go out from here with a few partnerships around events and with some professional services firms that may want to offer services to our CEO community. And we'll take stock at the end of those 12 months and decide how we want to build for the future from there. So lots of exciting things to come. I think we've probably given ourselves, as a pro bono project, given ourselves double the workload that we had last year. But, inshallah, we're looking forward to it. We're passionate about this. And we want to deliver value to our community and keep growing that community.
Yeah, inshallah.
I'll just add a little.
Umar, I know you go on quickly.
Come on, I like to get my piece in. So the only thing I'll add is that off the back of what Abdul Haseeb has said, which is really really important, right? When I think very deeply about these things, sometimes too deeply that I don't sleep, and then I kind of say to Abdul Haseeb, "Have you got 2 minutes for a conversation?" So just so you know, when we have a 2 minute conversation, that 2 minutes equals 1
I can
hour.
imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of the time it's obviously Abdul Haseeb doing all the talking, right? So that's why he never gets off the phone. Now, it was really, really important that when we launched this, only something like this only becomes successful, not because of me and Abdul Haseeb, because of the people that attend and find value, right? And this is the thing that really, really warms my heart, is to see other Muslim CEOs and founders doing really, really well, and then me and Abdul Haseeb can just shine a light on it, because that's what we want to do. We have got so much talent in this community, in this country, that we don't often, highlight it, okay? And also, it comes back to the ayah that I said earlier, وَاتَّصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَتَفَرَّقُوا, holding on to the rope of Allah, which basically means our common ground. But the key part is the second part, is do not be divided, because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, right, is that if Muslims are divided, believers are divided, not only will you not be successful, but society will suffer. Do you see what I mean? Society will suffer. So one of the key parts is that when we bring together Muslim CEOs and we can inspire them and impact them through our guest speakers and the methodology, we want them to do more business with one another, right? And we know, since we started in May, considering we started in May, not very long, we've been inundated with requests from international cities and people that are willing to host dinners internationally. And look, we're not going to learn to run before we can walk, right? And I remember Abdul Haseeb when he said to me, "Oh, let's do this for a year." And then about a month later down the line, I said, "You do know," because he said he's very good at starting things, and no doubt he is. He's very good at initiating things. So I just let him start it, and I said, "Well, you do know you're stuck now, right?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Year or no year, you're stuck. This is gonna."
Yeah, these sort of things don't last a year. These sort of things,
So he's now stuck.
they'll grow and grow. Yeah. Just lastly, Umar, thank you for that. So, people listening who may not have heard about Muslim CEOs or not experienced one of the events or anything like that, but for the next year or so want to get involved, how can they get involved? How can they find out more about what you guys are doing?
Abdul Haseeb, do you want to take that one, or shall I start?
Please go ahead.
So I think for the next 12 months and beyond, or just in general?
Just how can they get in general? Yeah, how can someone listening to this find out more about what you guys are, what Muslim CEO Collective is about?
So first of all, obviously the criteria is that you are a CEO, founder, or you can prove to us that you have some sort of authority when it comes to decision making, when it comes to business and trade. Okay. Like I said, we have a specific remit for that. And even you've got to bear in mind now, as we're starting to expand and we're growing, you'll get different spectrums of CEOs and founders. Do you see what I mean? So we're now actually discussing internally how we can we can segment different CEOs and create different kind of like areas for, I don't know, maybe a startup finder to learn from somebody who runs a 60 million turnover business, for example. Do you see what I mean? But we've got to create segments of bringing like-minded people together. So maybe we have a startup CEO community, like a SME one, and maybe the kind of like the bigger boys, right? These are the things that we are discussing. But we've got some really, really exciting plans in the pipeline. But the way we operate is we pretty much we go and vet people and find people. Do you see what I mean? This is a community where it's not something that you can, if we allow everybody to join, we just get inundated, right? And now we're looking to bring on a couple of team members to basically do that work on behalf of us. But uh, I would like to say, and maybe Abdul Haseeb might disagree to a certain degree, is that if you're doing some sort of important work, we'll find you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, the events that are always be the dinners that are always be the core of what we do, are predominantly for Muslim CEOs and founders, but this community has a lot to offer, Muslims in business generally. And I think, Muslims in other organizations who maybe aren't CEOs and founders, but are senior in their industries, have a lot to offer this community as well. In terms of your question about, where can they find out more, muslimceos.com is our web domain. We have a LinkedIn group where we coordinate all of our dinners. And if you look for Muslim CEOs on LinkedIn, you can find it there. And we'll be launching a WhatsApp community very soon as well, for those who have been to events, to carry on that connection and get to know others in the community as well. So lots of different touch points, and I think the main one I'll focus on is this podcast, right? The aspiration for this podcast is that the guest speakers that we have, those that are inspirational, influential, we will get them on this podcast with you as the host, Brother Rashid, and you will disseminate their story to a much broader audience, inspire the next generation, and others in business who maybe are thinking about doing something entrepreneurial, and also the interesting stories that we hear from CEOs, at our dinners. That'll make it onto this podcast as well. So something, they've got something in their experience or their story that we can all learn from. And I'm hugely looking forward to that, because I think, a lot of the demand we get is from folks who maybe, aren't CEOs, who can't attend the dinners, or folks that were too busy to attend a dinner but want to hear from a particular guest speaker. They don't get the opportunity live in the room, but this podcast will, inshallah, give them the opportunity to do that.
And just a couple of
Inshallah.
things on the back of that is really important, and I think there's a really important point made there in terms of a success story. But if we do manage to miss somebody off the list, then if they're a CEO founder, then reach out to us. We're very open. It's not that we're very closed-minded on this. We want as many people to come together that are decision makers, so we're open to that. And we create a safe space for both Muslim brothers and sisters to come together, right? But in the name of business, I think this is really, really important. But Omar Rashid, and Allah bless you, bro, because you went to one of our dinners and you approached us saying, "Look, I've been inspired," and it was your initiative to set up this podcast, right? And I think I'll just highlight that and thank you, because me and Abdul Haseeb are not going to do it together. That's not how it works. Remember, the strategic collaboration is do not be divided, and so we want people to come to the party and say, "Look, fantastic what you're doing. This is how I think I could add value. You thought you could add value here. Fantastic, because guess what? Me and Abdul Haseeb would love to do something like this. We don't have the time, and it's not about us doing everything either. We've got to empower other people to do their part and play their part. So thank you for taking on the initiative, and I'm glad that you were able to come to a dinner and see the value that was being created.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah. And listen, I just want to end with, look, may Allah reward you both for what you're doing. The last 12 months have been amazing. The event that I came to Birmingham, you've inspired me, and now you've inspired others as well. And inshallah, may Allah give you the strength and the tawfiq to continue that for the next 12 months. And yeah, it is going to be more than 12 months of the Haseeb. I think you're going to have to come to terms with that. It is going to be more than that. And I'm proud and I'm happy to be part of Muslim CEO, because the most important thing is it allows me to be me. One of the things I'm just going to end on is when I came to the event, the host, Zaygam, he asked me, how did you find this event? Because he knows I network a lot as well. And the best way I could describe it, and this was from me being as a Muslim, I felt like being at home. And I think for me to kind of go to an event to kind of say it felt like home, people listening, they can kind of hopefully understand that, we're going to an event where, like you said, it's halal, it's safe, there's no alcohol, and actually you're with people, you're with your brothers and sisters. You're not there that you see someone as a competitor or an enemy or anything like that. You're actually there with your brothers and sisters. So, may Allah reward you for that, because obviously you've created that platform, you've created that community, and may that continue as well. Ameen. Okay. So, Jazakallah khair for coming on to the podcast, to our podcast. It's the first episode, hopefully the first of many. Thank you very much, both of you, and inshallah we'll speak again soon.
Omar, you didn't tell us
Thank you
what
for having us.
you support.
I'm not even going to, don't worry. It's not about me. It is not about me. Brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair for listening to the first episode, which no doubt you will have found inspiring and valuable. You can listen again, inshallah, on our YouTube channel or on our podcast platforms by searching for Muslim CEOs. All our links are listed per episode, and you can also visit the website muslimceos.com for further details about the Muslim CEO Collective. Remember to follow and connect Muslim CEOs on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. Please do leave us a comment if you enjoyed the episode and if you have any questions. Until next time, remember us in your du'as, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast and put barakah in our health and our wealth. Ameen and assalamu alaikum.